Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. If you have problems with the IRS, don't focus on the negative, focus on the solutions. With the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish. For over 15 years, he's been helping taxpayers with IRS problems reclaim their lives and their financial stability. Now, here's your host of the IRS Solution Attorney Show, Darrin T. Mish.
Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Thank you for joining us this morning.
How you doing today, Katrina?
Doing great. And the weather feels fine, even though it's cloudy.
I was going to say, I usually talk about how beautiful it is outside. Today, not so much.
Well, it's kind of yucky out, but it's not hot. It's not humid.
It is humid. It's just not hot.
I wish the sun would be out for a while.
I think it's going to get better later on today. We could ask the
That's right.
weatherman.
No, it is going to be sunny this afternoon and nice. And then tomorrow, real pretty, sun all day. And then a little bit of a front coming in on Saturday, but no rain. So it's going to be nice. It'll be a little cooler on Saturday.
Goody, because
How about that for a weather report?
I just had my cars clean, my interior, and I need to open it up and let it air out, and I haven't been able to.
Well, when you come to work at 4:30 in the morning like me and it's raining and wet, you start feeling like a mushroom.
Shrivel up. So this is the IRS Solution Attorney Show.
It is, in fact, the IRS Solution Attorney Show. But before we start
talk
talking about
other stuff besides that.
Exactly. Before we start talking about tax stuff, which is, what I do all day, every day, I want to talk about the Pasco County Fair in Dade City, Florida. It's on State Road 52, right there next to Pasco High School.
Okay, so we have a wide range in this station. Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but we go from north of Newport Richey all the way into Sarasota, all the way over to Orlando.
Yes, we do.
Pretty big circle. So,
but not so much.
Depends on what station you're listening to.
Tell somebody why they should come to the Pasco County Fair. And Pat, go ahead and promote the channel. So 10:10 a.m., but there's FM.
And 103.1 FM. And then there's another one, 92.1. But that's on a top of a mailbox right around Del Mabry on
so
Lambright.
It's not ready yet?
Well, they were going to put it on, and the story's been told by Mason and Charlie on their show that they were going to put it on a nice high transmitter tower that has been around for a long time right by Egypt Lake Elementary. You probably in that area see that antenna that's been there, but it's rusting away and falling apart. And when they went up to put the antenna on, the pieces were breaking off in their hands. So they go, oops, this has got to be fixed before we can do this. So it is now on top of a mailbox, and you can hear it in any direction for about a block.
Is that true?
Yes.
It's literally just sitting basically on the ground someplace.
It's I think it could be 11 feet, 15 feet in the air.
Interesting. So that's real radio for you, right?
We
there.
Get the 411 with Pat because
Exactly.
he produces for Charlie and Mason, so they
But
have
it's
going to
get better.
So the significance
excited.
of the Pasco County Fair this particular weekend, what's today? February 23rd.
4th?
23rd.
So
Is it
today's
23rd?
February
Okay.
23rd. Tomorrow, February 24th, 2017, is the hog show at the Pasco County Fair, and there will be two Mishes exhibiting hogs there.
Wait, is that a dish or a mish?
A Mish. There will be two Mishes exhibiting hogs
like
there.
baby mishes.
The one is Ryan Mish, age 14. His hog's name is Porky or Porky Pie. And Miss Rachel Mish, who's 12, she will be exhibiting. Oh boy, her hog's name is Black Beauty. Almost forgot it.
At least for another 4 days, and then their name's going to be dinner.
And so there's a hog show on Friday evening at 6 p.m. and the auction is on Saturday. I'm not really sure.
Okay,
when
so
the auction
Darrin,
is.
explain this to non-farm people like me.
Okay,
what
so
does
here's
it like? Who buys a pig? Because I buy bacon at the store, but I
That's
can't
why they
imagine
have
buying a pig.
Publix and Winn-Dixie's.
Well, interestingly enough, Publix buys a large number of these hogs at the auction to support, kids in FFA and 4-H. But the idea behind the fair is to teach kids agricultural practices and teach them how to raise an animal and have the respect for the animal and whatnot. But also some capitalism skills, some financial skills, because they have to budget money for feed and other care. Sometimes you need a vet to come out during the course of a project. The project lasts about 4 or 5 months. So we've had these hogs at the house for 4 or 5 months, and then they go and there's a show where there's a judge, usually from someplace like Iowa or Nebraska where there's lots of hogs.
Wow.
And the judge, all the kids go out in different weight classes, and they get judged. The hog gets judged, and the kid gets judged as a showman and their ability to show the pig. And then the next day there's an auction, and the pigs and therefore the kids are ranked in their order of finish in the show. So
Okay.
the best, the grand champion goes first. He gets the highest amount, and no hog after that can get even the same amount as that grand champion went.
So what are they looking for? Like, because I saw the pictures of you on Facebook where the kids are walking the pigs.
It's funny. Hog judges have different things that they look for, but basically they're looking for an Arnold Schwarzenegger of hogs.
Oh, a big one. Okay.
Big, bulky. I've been to enough hog shows now, and the funny thing is I wasn't raised in agriculture. I really don't know much about agriculture,
I know,
honestly.
he's a California boy, if you can believe that.
And I just happened to, we bought the farm because I think it's cool, and that's really the only reason, and because I wanted to raise kids with wholesome values and,
Yes.
small town life.
But when I think of a Californian, I don't think of you.
Yeah.
Which is why you're a Floridian.
I think that might be a compliment. I'm not really
It
sure.
was a compliment.
But so I've been to enough hog shows now that I kind of get what a good show hog looks like. And the best thing I can equate it to is if it looks like it would be good to eat, it's a good show hog. I mean, that people don't know this, but you always think of Boston butt as the rear of the hog. That's not the case. It's actually a shoulder. In the butt of the hog, those big round like glutes, that's actually the hams. So as the hog is walking away from you, if you look at their rear and you can imagine just big, beautiful ham in your oven, that's how I judge a hog. And of the 2 hogs the kids have this year, Porky Pie is amazing because he just looks like he's going to be good to eat. Somebody's going to get really lucky with him.
Normally, when I see stuff like that, I start looking for coleslaw too to go with it.
Yeah, you need some corn on the cob.
I
maybe
will
some
never look at
beans,
ham the same way
some
again.
barbecue sauce, that kind of thing. So if you've never been to a livestock show, this is your opportunity at the Pasco County Fair this week.
So what if somebody has no intention at all of buying a pig?
Yeah, it's
Do they enjoy the show?
it's still really interesting because it's so foreign to us. Most people, and us included, our family as well, we kind of equate food comes from the grocery store, right? I mean, you go to Publix and there's like steaks wrapped in styrofoam and plastic, and you look at them and you're like, okay, that's a good one. I'm going to take that. And it's just a way to kind of get back to your roots a little bit and see this is where your pork comes from. And like I said, Publix buys an awful lot of these kids' hogs at the auction. And that pork ends up in the case at a grocery store somewhere. I'm not really sure where, but Publix is based in Lakeland, and Lakeland's only 20 minutes from Dade City.
Yeah.
So they buy a lot of hogs. It's also a way for business owners to show their support for the community. And when business owners buy a hog at the auction, their business name gets said over and over and over again. And so that's probably pretty good for their businesses as well, at least in that little local community.
Well, that makes sense to me.
So that has absolutely nothing to do really with tax problems or taxes.
But we got to keep it real, you know.
I'm just really proud of the kids, and this is their 3rd year, and you can see the progression. They're getting better and better and better. And
Or if you just want to come out and meet Darrin Mish, he'll be out there with the kids. So you can come out and say hello. He is a real person. I've been out and about, and many of you have walked up to me and said hello. Sometimes people don't even know who I am.
Yep.
Like we did that vision board planning thing a while back, and I was talking to a couple people, and they had no idea that I was Katrina. I guess they thought I was somebody else.
After about noon, there's an extremely high likelihood that I would be enjoying an adult beverage at the fair. So
Trust me, he is more fun to talk to after he's had some adult beverages. So come afternoon, I would highly encourage that.
So if you want to seek me out, it won't be that hard. I'll be hanging around the pig barn. I'll be the guy in cowboy boots. Oh, except for at this fair, it won't really be that big of a defining difference.
I was going to say, you're in Pasco County, Darrin.
Exactly.
Everybody is going to be wearing cowboy boots, especially at the pig show.
And it's too hot to wear my cowboy hats. I mean, it's just too hot. So I do have a number of cowboy hats, but they're just too hot to wear in Florida.
All right. So what time will you be there, and where can they find you?
I will be there probably almost all day Friday, and then almost all day Saturday, honestly. And I'll be hanging around the pig barn. It's not that hard to find. There's only one. The fairgrounds are so small. There's only really one barn in the entire place. And
follow the smell.
yeah, it has to be. They do the cows early in the week, and then they do the pigs at the end of the week. So the last day of the fair is Sunday. And
how many pigs are entering? Do you know?
Oh, it's amazing. Like 300.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of pigs.
So next week when we come in, we'll find out how the pigs did and where they placed.
Absolutely.
We'd like to find out how they taste.
Well, we grow an alternate too. So like we raise 3, because if you're going to raise 2, you might as well raise 3 because you can have one for the family. And so after that hog gets slaughtered and butchered and all that, and it ends up in the freezer, it takes like a year to eat it because it's just a lot of pork.
Not for me.
I know. I love bacon. I don't know what part of the pig that comes from, but I love it.
Well, when we come back, I think we actually might talk about taxes or tax problems or attorney stuff.
We are. We're going to make it fun, I promise. We're going to talk about the 5 questions that Darrin gets most as a tax attorney. I wouldn't actually call that your name, but yeah, I guess he's a tax attorney, but he's your attorney to help you out if you got a little beef with the IRS, or in your case, most of the time it's a big beef with the IRS. So.
Yeah, usually it's a big deal.
You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell.
And I'm Darrin T. Mish, the IRS Solution Attorney.
And stick around. We'll be back in just a minute. If you got a question, you can call us at 888-404-1010. Again, save that number in your phone, 888-404-1010. We'll be back in just a minute.
Are you suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin T. Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin T. Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com, because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell, and throwing Darrin off a little bit as I just pushed his phone to him, and I said, here, quick, turn it on. We're going to stream live on Facebook. So.
And then just as I was doing that re-intro, I hit the volume button, and I couldn't hear myself, and then I got kind of freaked out again. So that's proof, further proof that I'm not a radio professional.
Pat just pops it on when we're not looking. That happens, too.
Yeah, well, he just has to mess with us. That's his deal. But today we're talking about the 5 questions that I get the most as a tax attorney, or as an IRS tax attorney, as Katrina likes to call me. Sometimes I just call myself a tax attorney because it makes it easier for people to understand what I do. And the first question...
I actually prefer the IRS guy. That's usually what I call you.
We're the IRS Solution Attorney, right? So the first question that I get most often is, am I going to go to prison because I owe the IRS taxes? And I get that question, several times a week. People call and they're petrified. Sometimes... This is kind of funny that they won't even give us their real name and or address. They just want to consult, and it's like, what's your name? John Smith. Where do you live? 123 Main Street. And over the years, I've not had real good luck with those people who won't give me their name, because it's just usually indicator of other stuff that's kind of wrong and going on in their lives. So anyway, the answer is no, you're not really going to go to prison as a result of your tax debt unless you've committed tax evasion or fraud of some sort. Then it's theoretically possible. But in this country, no one goes to jail for owing taxes. One of the things that distinguished us from, Britain before the revolution, was we don't have debtors' prisons in the United States of America. It's just not what we have. You can go to jail for cheating on your taxes, which means lying on your taxes. So lying, can equal jail. But the failure to file a tax return, I guess theoretically you can go to jail for the failure to file a tax return. It's a federal misdemeanor, and you can do up to a year in federal prison for that. But
isn't that kind of only with those crazy people that are like, don't file taxes, it's unconstitutional, those people? Yeah,
I've met some U.S. attorneys that used to prosecute tax crimes, and I always ask them, so, all of my clients are non-filers. Why don't you prosecute everyone? And basically they said, we just don't have the resources to prosecute every non-filer. The percentage of the population that doesn't file a tax return is something like 10%. So you're talking,
that's a big number.
You're talking 20 million people probably every year that don't file a tax return. So the federal government simply doesn't have the resources to prosecute all those people. And the IRS has a written policy that says that if you're a non-filer and you eventually file your tax returns, if they were not investigating you for the crime of failure to file, they will not prosecute you for that. So I think the simple answer is you're not going to jail unless you've done something really, really bad, or if you really kind of worked at it.
Well, I can see where the general population would think that, and you and I have talked about this several times about how literally when people come in, they're like petrified, or they're scared, or they're like neurotic. They've driven themselves near to the point of insanity.
Yeah,
because they're
sure.
so worked up and consumed and worried about this.
Yeah, we see a lot of people that are at that level of anxiety, and it really breaks my heart because it's not really needed. I've told the story before on air, and I know you've heard it more than once, Katrina, of the gentleman who came in.
But that's why I brought it up, because I was hoping you would tell it.
Yeah, the gentleman who came in, and he was quite a bit older than I was, but he was physically, trembling, shaking. He was just racked with anxiety. It wasn't that hard to read his body language and understand that this was somebody who was just not feeling comfortable, And so I tried to nail him down. I said, "Tell me, why are you so nervous? Like, what's the problem here?" And he says, "Well, I haven't filed a tax return in a while." And I got a big smile, because I hear that all day, right?
What's a while?
So what's a while? And he says, "Well, a long time." I'm like, "Hey, a long time's relative. Like, how long?" And he says, he told me this big long story, but it boiled down to, well, since 1960. And I couldn't help it. I started laughing. And the reason I started laughing was I was born in 1967. And so it was just kind of funny. Like, this guy has not filed a tax return for the entire length of my life. And I'm going to be the guy that gets to help him fix it. Now, before people start freaking out about this guy didn't pay taxes for his whole life, he was always,
because we get the haters.
Yeah, he was always a W-2 wage earner. He always had taxes withheld. He just didn't file, and it had something to do with some bad experience he had back in the Army.
Something that started something that was a snowball to where he got.
Yeah,
right?
And so he had this mental block about filing. So long story short, we helped him file the past 6 years' returns. We got him current. We got him up to date, and it all worked out. So. But that's my favorite story about him. I got to go to prison because that's why he was so anxious.
You had another one too. What about the rocker guy or the guy in the band that was thought people was waiting outside of his window? Remember?
Yeah, I actually still represent him, and so I won't give away too many clues about who he is. But he was absolutely convinced. He heard he was really kind of fixated on the anxiety and not filing on the IRS and all that stuff. And he was really convinced that they were closing in on him. And I don't remember if it was because he got some of those phishing emails or maybe he got one of those bogus phone calls or something. But he was really fixated that this was going to go down. And so one night he was having trouble sleeping and he heard some noises outside his window. And he was convinced it was the IRS was going to raid his house and take him away and take him to jail. And that hasn't happened and it's not going to happen.
But people get so... you get caught up in your own thoughts and they can run wild and go away from you sometimes.
And we all do that. I mean, I'm not criticizing at all the people who feel like that.
But it's fear of the unknown.
Yeah. That's what humans actually fear the most is uncertainty. You said it great. The fear of the unknown is one of our biggest fears. And if you kind of dig deep and think about, well, what are you afraid of? It always comes down to, well, I don't know what's going to happen. And,
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen next, so that's the big.
And a lot of people come in and they're very anxious and they don't know what's going to happen with the IRS, and it's not really fair because how would they know what's going to happen? They've never been in this problem before. They don't know how to deal with this massive government bureaucracy, and that's why they come to us because I actually can tell them what's going to happen with a fairly high degree of certainty, and we can just run them through our process and kind of walk them through step by step. You do this, then you do this, and then you do this. Incidentally, the people who actually follow our reasonable advice get much better results than the people who kind of halfway follow advice or don't follow advice. Yeah, people who follow our reasonable advice, and I say reasonable advice because I don't give unreasonable advice. If they follow our reasonable advice, then it's all going to work out, 9 times out of 10.
The other question I know you get a lot too, and a lot of times this is what actually brings them into your office or prompts them to make that first call, is what happens if they garnish the wages?
Yeah, this is a hard question. So it's like, what do I do if the IRS is garnishing my paycheck? Well,
and that means
they
send a letter to the employer,
right?
They
send a notice called a notice of levy. It's a form 668W, just in case you wanted to know.
You don't have to memorize. No quiz later.
Yeah, they send that levy notice to the employer, and basically the government's going to take about 80% of your paycheck, and it depends on how much money you make.
80%?
Kind of
Wait a minute. I've never heard this.
They're going to take this huge percentage of your paycheck. There's no basis in reality for you could actually live on this tiny amount that they're going to leave you, leave you with.
80.
Yeah, there's actually a table. I think it's publication 1494, and it basically says, if you're single and you have X number of dependents and you get paid weekly or biweekly or bi-month or semi-monthly or monthly, then this is how much you get to keep.
But if you don't do that in advance, then they're going to swoop 80%?
Well, they're going to swoop almost 80% anyway, regardless.
Okay.
You know, unless you're very low income, in which case you might make so little money that you're what we call levy proof, which means, you know, they can levy you, but they're not going to get any money. But if you're levy proof, you have other issues. Like, it's already hard to live on these tiny amounts of money that you earn. So the IRS doesn't really levy you in the hopes that they're going to get all that you owe them. They're levying you to get your attention. You know, it's like whenever I think of a wage levy, I think of the IRS grabbing you by the shoulders and shaking you like, you know, a shaken baby. They're like, hello, McFly, like, wake up. Like, you got to pay attention to us. And one of the things that's hard about a wage levy is you have to have your missing tax returns filed before they're going to agree to release the levy.
Ouch.
Now, here's the challenge.
That's the deal killer.
Yeah, here's the challenge. What if it's been 5 years? What if it's been 10 years since you filed a tax return and you got to get 5 or 10 tax returns prepared?
Well, you don't have to do that many, do you?
Well, you might. You're right. You're saying, well, you only have to file the last 6, but there's some circumstances where you might have to file all 10. I don't really have time to explain that circumstance, but
and everybody's scenario is a little different.
yeah, everybody's scenario is certainly different. But here's the point I'm trying to make is, let's say you have 3 tax returns that you need to prepare and they just took your paycheck and you don't have anything in reserve. This is very common. There's nothing in reserve for a rainy day or emergencies. And now you're kind of stuck. You're like in this vicious loop. No, so what do? Is you either call a tax attorney who can help you with this, or at least give you some advice about how to get it released, or you can call the IRS. If all else fails, call the IRS and just tell them, hey, this is causing me a hardship. If you release the levy, I'll file my missing returns.
Yeah,
and
but what's
I need
the
some time.
likelihood that they would do that?
It's all over the map. It's probably my least favorite task in the firm, to call and try and deal with wage levies. It's just hard. You know, I've had wage levies that that went on for long periods of time, very long periods of time, and it was just not really that resolvable. And there's a couple little secret things we can do to try to get the wage levy released, but it's a challenging thing.
Maybe we can talk about some of the secrets when we come back. Can I get those out of you on air?
Because we don't talk about them on the radio.
Oh, snap. Did you hear that? He just said no. All right. So we'll move on to the next topic then. And maybe Darrin will tell you if you make an appointment with him if you got a tax issue. But, you know, we'll talk about what happens if the IRS levies your bank account and what that means and how ugly that is when it happens. Right?
It's not a happy thing.
All right. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. You can get Darrin at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or you can visit our website at getirshelp.com. And
we are here in the studio. In case you don't remember 888-GET-MISH and you just want to talk to us, it's 888-404-1010. Pat George back there going to give you an update on traffic. We'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome back. I am the IRS Solution Attorney Show. No, I'm actually not the show, but I am the IRS Solution Attorney.
You're the show today, Darrin. You're the show today.
Darrin T. Mish.
I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. This is, in fact, a live show. I love it when we can trip on our own words.
It is, in fact,
You'd
live.
see the beauty of this as, Darrin, you wouldn't have been able to do that a couple years ago.
Oh, no.
But now you can just kind of keep going.
I probably would have ran away and started crying, sucking my thumb.
Well, it was funny. Like, for the first year I was in the radio, I pre-recorded all of my shows. Did you see that post that I made yesterday? I pre-recorded all of my shows, and, like, literally yesterday, 3 years ago, was the first time I ever went live on the air. And now we do it all the time.
Well, you got good fast, so there's that. You know.
I can talk.
But I can also remember our first show was not pre-recorded, that, you know, on the IRS Solution Attorney.
We were pre-recorded.
We were? The very first show?
When I had you as a guest on Tampa Home Talk many moons ago, we were pre-recorded, and we were also pre-recorded, I believe, for your show when we started.
Anyway, okay, so show number 2, we were live, and it was a little bit intimidating, a little bit scary, but not so much anymore. Today we're talking about the answers to the 5 questions that I hear the most as an IRS tax attorney. And I think we're on question number 3, and it's, what can I do to keep the IRS from levying my bank account? Interesting. Well, what is an IRS bank levy? Okay. Well, if you were listening in the last segment, you heard that a wage levy or a wage garnishment is when the IRS can take, you know, a huge proportion of your paycheck. A bank levy is when the IRS can swoop in and take 100% of your bank account. Did you get that percentage? 100% of your bank account.
But it's not permanent, is it?
They're entitled to 100% of the proceeds, or the amount of the money that's in your bank account on the day that the levy is processed by the bank. The bank holds that money for 21 days, and cannot turn it over to the IRS for the 21 days. And the reason that the 21 days is there is for the taxpayer to contact the IRS and try to basically make a deal to get the money back.
We've talked about this before too. Just because they went in and took 100% of the money in the bank that day doesn't mean they can keep doing it anytime you put money in the bank. Is that correct?
You know what's great about
and
doing
that's
this
what
show
I
is
would think they're going to do.
You're actually learning. You're learning very well.
Don't ask me if I will work for you because the answer is no.
I don't think I could afford you either. But a bank levy, unlike a wage levy is it's continuous. Okay, so a wage levy goes on and on and on and on every payday until either the tax debt is paid or you get the IRS to release the levy or the statute of limitations expires, I guess. But a bank levy is a one-time levy. That doesn't mean they can only levy you one time. It means it's not continuous. So they're entitled to the money in the bank account on the day the levy is processed, and that's it. Your bank account is not frozen. This is a common misconception. People think, oh, my bank account is frozen. I'm not going to be able to, use my bank account anymore. No, it's not frozen. Now, the bank's going to charge you some fee, like $50 or $75 to process the levy, kind of like what they would charge you if you bounce a check. So you may have to, it might be severely negative by the time, the levy's processed and whatnot. But if you cure that negative balance with the bank, then you can go ahead and use that bank account again. So.
Well, think about that, Darrin. If the IRS just swooped 100% of your money, and you can answer this, Pat, and chime in, but if they just took 100% of the money in your bank account, how likely are you to put your next paycheck in there? I don't think that's going to happen. Do you?
Oh, I've got a great story about that.
Not only not put your paycheck in there, but get in your car and disappear for the rest of your life.
I mean, if it were me, like, imagine if you have direct deposit, I would be freaking out. Like, I don't even know if I would probably open up a bank account in someone else's name and, like, figure out what I could do to hire an attorney.
In the Cayman Islands.
It's a funny story. Guy calls me up one day, and he's got a bank levy, and he hasn't filed in many years, and but he makes a lot of money. And he calls me up and he says, I just got a bank levy, and there's $50,000 in the bank. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's unfortunate. Long story short, we used one of those secrets, and we got the money back, okay?
Yeah, the secrets that he won't tell on air. We just talked about this last segment.
But he won't come into the office. This guy would not come into the office to like actually resolve the entire problem. And we tried and tried and tried. It went months and months and months. Long story short, he calls me up again, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 months later, and he's like angry. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? He says, they levied my bank account again.
Oh, they can keep doing it at different times?
They can. They're not supposed to do it continuous, but they can do it every, periodically. And I said,
kind of like they poke you and then they poke you again.
I said, oh, well, that's unfortunate. How much money was in the bank? He says $50,000. I'm like, what are you, a slow learner? It's like, okay. And the reason I'm telling this story is because if you know you're potentially subject to a bank levy, what's the easiest way to prevent the bank levy? Answer: don't keep much money in the bank. It's fairly simple, right?
Like, I don't know. How much did they swoop the first time?
$50,000.
The first time and the second time?
And the second time. It's like really, you're a slow learner, okay? It's like, okay, if you leave that money...
His brain is a little bruised, I think. Man, that's hard.
So...
But for that amount of money, like, how much was his debt? How much did he owe, do you know?
It was
Remember?
In the high hundreds.
Yeah, but for $50,000, I mean, he could have hired you for a fraction of that and would have already dealt with it.
He did hire me for a fraction of that. He just wouldn't communicate or interact with me. His anxiety was so severe that he could not face it. It was like he would, how people are afraid of public speaking, and here we are on the radio, right, and speaking to lots of people, but that's one of the biggest fears. Well, his biggest fear was dealing or confronting the IRS issue, period. End of story. He just couldn't deal with it. And I understand, and I'm compassionate about that, but at some level, you got to deal with your problems.
But shouldn't I don't know, was he married? Could his wife deal with it?
No, he was single. He was in sales, made a lot of money, which is part of the reason why he owed so much money. But he just couldn't wrap his head around filing tax returns and dealing with the IRS at all. So
all right,
anyway, the point of the story was slow learner.
Very slow learner. Like I said, bruised brain on that one. The next point, which is pretty interesting because certainly one of the things that I thought would not apply, didn't even realize it was an option until you and I started doing the show, is you can, in fact, file bankruptcy in some instances to settle IRS debt, which is astounding to me because I thought they were like, you couldn't include them, like anything government.
Yeah, this is kind of a scary statistic. I think 9 out of 10 bankruptcy lawyers will tell you that taxes cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. And so here we are.
Why is that? Why is that you're saying it can be and 9 out of 10 attorneys are saying no? They just don't know?
Okay, I have to be very delicate here.
I said it, not him.
when we go to the doctor, we assume that all doctors are basically have the basic same skill level, right? That's not true. I mean,
I would agree.
That's as polite as I can be.
Not all professions are created equal.
The other problem is that bankruptcy law firms, because of the way the fees are set, and the courts set the fees, and the fees are very low, okay, that bankruptcy law firms, as a necessity to make a profit, have to run kind of like a factory assembly line widget kind of practice. Okay, so they have to like...
It's a volume thing.
It's a volume thing. They can't afford to spend much time on any particular case. I'm not knocking any of my bankruptcy lawyer friends.
But that's the model.
But that's the business model. It's very hard. I actually failed trying to run a bankruptcy firm, trying to make it profitable. I could not do it. I just would spend too much time on the cases because I'm a fine detail kind of guy. I'm a lower volume guy. So the answer is, I'm not sure they don't know that taxes can be discharged in bankruptcy, or if they just don't want to go down that, they don't want to go down that hole. So there's 3 timing rules that are involved, and they're kind of complicated, but I'm going to hit them real fast. The returns have to have been due for at least 3 years, including extensions. The returns, if they were filed late, have to have been filed for at least 2 years, and the taxes have to have been assessed for at least 240 days. So that was a bunch of mumbo jumbo, right?
Yeah.
So the way to think of it is, if you filed on time, or roughly on time, then you have to wait at least 3 years. If they were filed late, you have to wait 2 years. Unless it was, unless they're not that late.
Wait, if they filed late, you're in like Flynn, as long as you're delinquent 3 years? Is that right?
Well, there's lots of permutations and things that could happen that aren't that interesting on radio. But if you needed to file a 2012 tax return, 2012 was due in 2013. That would mean that 3-year rule would pass whether you filed or not in 2016. But if you didn't file it until 2014, then you got to worry about the 2-year rule. So
gotcha.
Anyway.
So you look at those little nuances to see if it's possible. But so I take it there's times and there's customers you've had that you can totally wipe out their. Or what's the biggest one you've had? The biggest tax that you were able to wipe out in bankruptcy.
The biggest case that I can remember
off the cuff
is a pretty interesting story. It was a Canadian national who is living in Mexico with a United States source income. Okay, so it's a Canadian living in Mexico.
That's an interesting dynamic.
But his income is coming from the U.S., so he has to pay U.S. taxes. And he was also a permanent resident of the U.S., but he was living in Mexico. I don't know why. I do know why. He had gotten married and he was living in northern Mexico. So long story short, he was a client of mine for many years, 10 plus years. He was kind of another slow learner kind of guy. And we eventually got him on track. And long story short, he owed $1.2 million to the IRS. And we filed a Chapter 7 in Tampa, Florida. And we wiped out like 1.1 something million of it. I think he had 50 or 75 grand left, because it didn't meet the timing rules. But then we put him in an installment agreement after that, and he was in like Flint. Now, I don't know. I think he's still current and everything, because I hear from him every so often. But it was a funny kind of circumstance, because there was a real aggressive revenue officer who called me from Miami, and she was basically threatening me personally about representing this particular individual. And she was talking about, she actually threatened me with prison, and I just went off on her. I mean, I went off on her in the most professional way possible, but I was like, look, I'm not engaging in criminal activity, and I don't know who you think you are, but you're not going to threaten me with prison. Like, that might work with some taxpayers, but that's completely inappropriate. I was so angry about this. I called her back a week later and did it again. And anyway, we ended up winning that case.
That's like the mob threatening OJ's attorney or something. I don't know. It's just weird.
My example to her was, Al Capone had a lawyer.
There you go.
He said, I'm not telling this guy not to file and pay his taxes. I have been involved for a long time, but that entire time I've been telling him to file and pay your taxes. We got to get you current. And he just was a very, very slow learner, and it ended up racking up a lot of tax debt. But I got the last word on that one, because as soon as he files bankruptcy, that case gets ripped away from her, goes to a different department. She never hears whatever happened on the case. So I could have actually filed basically an internal affairs complaint about
That's what
her,
I was thinking.
But, and I think it would have been sustained. I mean, you're going to threaten counsel. You're not even allowed to threaten the taxpayer with prison, let alone counsel. So it was just kind of a bizarre situation. She did eventually apologize, but it's kind of a half-hearted apology.
Wow. So the last point on the 5 top FAQs you get as a tax attorney is it possible to settle the debt for less than you owe? And if you've listened to the IRS Solution Attorney Show more than once, you already know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't think there would be a show if that wasn't possible, right?
I would agree with you.
Almost everybody that comes in to see me wants to settle for less. And we just talked about bankruptcy, so that certainly, if you qualify for that, you can settle your tax debt for less. I guess. I don't know if that's settling or if that's just discharging, but...
Well, it's settling. I mean, you scratched it out.
When we come back, we can talk all about an offer and compromise, which is where you can make a deal to settle for less with the IRS. There's a little bit of horse trading and there's a little bit of simple math, but you can, in fact, in certain circumstances, settle for less with the IRS.
So we're going to talk about the offer and compromise when we come back, which we've done a whole show on that. But we're going to also answer some questions that you guys have had that you've tweeted Darrin up at Darrin_Mish.
And stay tuned for the IRS train wreck of the week.
That's right. And also on Twitter. And we're streaming live on Darrin's page right now. We'll share that over to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. And if you have a question for Darrin directly, you can get him at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 888-438-6474, or you can visit our website at getirshelp.com.
And we are live in the studio, so if you have a question and you want to talk to us, you can get us at 888-404-1010. Save that number here to the studio, 888-404-1010. Back in a moment.
Come back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney. I'm a legend in my own mind as well.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Thanks for sticking with us through the break. We've had fun today.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have, for sure.
We have fun every day.
But we're running out of time because I have kind of a long IRS train wreck of the week.
All right, so talk about your offer and compromise quickly because we've got to answer the question.
So an offer and compromise is where you make a deal to settle for less. It's based upon a relatively simple math equation that goes like this. Your monthly disposable income multiplied by 12 plus the value of your assets equals the amount of your offer. So quick example. Let's say you had monthly disposable income of $100. 100 times 12 is $1,200. Let's assume for just a moment you have no assets. You could settle your IRS tax debt for $1,200. It doesn't matter so much how much you owe. It matters more about how much you can afford to pay according to this equation. And so that's the secret behind how we get these great deals for people who owe, hundreds of thousands of dollars. If they're in a situation where their monthly disposable income is very low and their assets are negligible or very low, or we can help plan to get their monthly disposable income down low by using legal, ethical, and moral means, then we can get them a really great deal. And so very few people come in from, off the street that are perfect, ideal candidates for an offer and compromise. And I get people asking me all the time, can I do this on my own? Answer, yeah, you can. And I could work on my own plumbing when it stops up too, but I'm not going to because I know I'm going to create a mess.
All right, so let's answer some questions from our listeners. Ron actually had a very good one. He hit you up on Twitter at Darrin_Mish. And that question is, can you claim your child if you pay child support? It's a pretty good question.
Well, the rule is you're supposed to only claim the child if you provide more than 50 or 51% of their support.
Or if it's split, don't they rotate year to year?
But as a practical matter, you have to follow what's in the in the dissolution decree and the divorce decree. You have to follow whatever the court decided.
Or child support order or whatever you got.
So sometimes the court's going to give the kids, for tax purposes to one spouse or the other or one parent or the other. Sometimes it's rotating.
Because every scenario is different. So they may have had two kids and maybe one spouse claims one kid and the other one claims the other one. So
we just had a situation where it was better for my client to let his former spouse claim the child for reasons that I can't explain right now. But
gotcha.
I was like,
hey,
she's not entitled to
that. We had a question from Judy. We'll answer that next week.
We just about got run over by the IRS train wreck of the week. So today's train wreck is a little bit different than normal. I get a little bit bored just talking about, win after win after win. So this is going to be a partial win story today. I have a client where we filed an offer and compromise, and it's really timely that I just explain how an offer works. And one of the things is he has a rental house. This case is still going on. He has a rental house up north, and the IRS wants to count the rental income as income, but doesn't want to count the mortgage or any of the costs of, maintaining that house as expenses. So they want their cake and they want to eat it too.
I was going to say, that's not real math by any standards.
And there's an overarching rule in my world, in the IRS, problem resolution world, that any expense that's necessary for the production of income is an allowable expense. So what does that mean? Well, if you got to spend money to make money, you get that as an expense.
It's kind of like a real estate agent. If I don't have a car and I can't drive, I probably can't make a living.
Yeah. So, he wouldn't have that rental house if he didn't pay the mortgage.
Right.
Would you agree with that as
Agreed.
a real estate professional?
Yes.
If he doesn't pay the mortgage, he's not going to have the house. What if he didn't pay the property taxes? What if he didn't pay the insurance? He's not going to have the house. So the IRS is like, we want to attribute the income to him, but none of the expenses. And that means that the offer cannot work because he now has the ability to pay in this like fictional, like weirdness land that they're, interpreting this. And this goes through two levels. It goes through the field level, the initial level that decides the offer. They make this bizarre sort of, decision. And then I file an appeal because I'm like, this can't stand. This is ridiculous. So I file the appeal, and the appeal goes kind of like this. The appeal's on the phone, kind of goes like this. Well, you lose. Like, well, ma'am, let me explain to you in all these different ways using the Internal Revenue Manual why I don't lose. And the whole time she's just completely closed off to me. She's like, nope, you lose. A house is a house is a house. You only get one house. We're going to take the income. We're not going to give you the expenses. You lose. So this goes on for about 10 minutes, and I'm starting to lose my patience. And finally, I take a deep breath, and I said, look, can I just get the name and phone number of your supervisor? And I just want to talk to the supervisor about it, and we can probably get this resolved. And she said, absolutely. She gives me the name and stuff, and she says something like, well, I would be absolutely shocked if my supervisor changes this decision that I've made. I said, I imagine that you would be shocked. Because what I'm saying in my mind is because you don't have a clue what you're doing.
Yeah, and it went through two people already.
So I hang up with her, and I make another phone call. I call another buddy of mine who's a nationally renowned expert, and I go, hey, am I off?
Just to make sure you're not missing something.
Yeah, I'm like, am I missing something? Is there something wrong here? Like, this is what I think. And he goes, Darrin, absolutely. You're totally right. That's what I would argue. And so I'm on the phone with him for like 45 minutes. We're talking about, he's coming to visit today, as a matter of fact, from up north. And we're visiting and whatnot. And then I get this phone message, and it was that lady, the appeals lady, had called back, and she wanted me to call her back. So I called her back, and but her demeanor is completely changed. She's like
must
nice.
Have talked to somebody.
She's nice. So she says, I went and talked to my supervisor, and I've never handled this exact type of situation before. And we need the following documents, XYZ 1, 2, 3. And if we'll give you a couple weeks to provide those documents. It was all documents pertaining to the expenses associated with the rental, right? She says, if you do that, then we'll reconsider our decision.
Mortgage statement, tax bill, insurance.
Yeah, I can't go into the particulars, but just stuff,
It's just common sense,
documentation. And so this is not like a grand slam home run victory, but I can tell you this with a high degree of certainty that no taxpayer would ever have pulled that thing out of the fire, ever, because they would have just thought, well, I'm wrong, I lose.
They said, you lose, you're done.
And I would say a very high percentage of professionals that do what I do also would have lost that. And I was just so convinced that was a wrong decision on so many levels. I just was not going to go down, lying down. I was going to go out swinging.
You the best.
Well,
that's why.
Well, if you're right, you're right, you're right. And I'm that way too. I will argue my point to the death if I'm right.
And the thing about an IRS appeal for an offer in compromise is that's the final word. There's no court to appeal to. You can't go. There's no one else to go to. If you lose, you lose. And so that's why I was like grasping at straws.
I'm not losing.
Give me the supervisor. I need a lifeline. You like that old TV show.
Yeah.
But
I'm not giving up.
I have a very high degree of certainty that case is going to work out just fine.
So that's one we're kind of in the middle of. Might be our train wreck.
So we might come back in another month or so.
With that train wreck. At least.
Yeah, it's probably another month. We have to get them their paperwork by Monday, and I think we have it.
All
but
right.
by the way, his expenses, not even counting the mortgage, his expenses on that house outweigh the rental. So all he wanted them to do was offset the rental or the rental income. Just ignore the rental income. If you ignore the rental income, I win. That's all I'm trying to get them to do. I'm not even trying to get them to allow the mortgage.
So what I'm hearing is blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to win. Blah, blah, I'm trying to win. That's what I hear. How about you, Pat?
That's what we're going to hear tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Well,
That's right.
Who doesn't want to win?
All right. So join me tomorrow for Tampa Home Talk. I'll be here with Make It Burn, another really cool real estate related homey topic for you. This week, we're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show.
And for this week, we're out.